Welcome everyone. My name's Professor Mike Bradshaw. Until last July I was Vice President for Research and Higher Education at the RGS, and I was on council for 5 years. I'm no longer in that role. I was also at that time Professor of Human Geography at the University of Leicester. I'm no longer in that role either. I am now Professor of Global Energy at Warwick Business School, and it's partly in that capacity that I'm here this evening to chair the event on behalf of Rita, who's sorry she can't be with us. This is part of the 21st Century Challenges series, which is a series of events, lectures, discussions, focusing on key issues that affect the UK, society and the wider world, issues relating to sustainability, social inequality, impact of globalization, for example. So the aim of the 21st Century Challenges is to engage audiences and inspire people to engage with geography, the big challenges that the world faces, and to hear from leading experts. And I think this evening we have a panel of excellent speakers. So if I could briefly introduce the theme this evening, Escape to the City. I think most of us usually escape from the city, but this evening we're escaping to the city. Just to note that the world's undergoing the largest wave of urban growth in history. In 2008, for the first time in history, more than half of the world's population lived in towns and cities. In 2008 also was the year when energy demand from the non-OECD, the developing world, passed that of the developed world. So in my own work, one of the issues about urbanization, the rate of urbanization, is the impact it has on global energy demand. With the rate of urban growth at the moment, we could see 75% of the world's population living in cities by 2050, with much of that growth happening in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. Again, the location of about 90% of the projected energy demand growth. So there's a whole series of questions that we need to ask about the impact of living in an urban environment on our well-being, on the environment, how we can balance rapid urbanization with quality of life to make cities happier and more livable. So we have a great panel of speakers who you'll hear about in a minute. I have a number of housekeeping announcements. We don't expect a fire alarm. Hopefully there won't be a fire alarm. Tonight is being filmed, as you can see, and all the talks in the series will be made freely available to watch online, including additional talks, interviews, news and features. There's also free Wi-Fi available in the Society, and if you tweet, you can tweet at #21cc, and the CC is lowercase. Doesn't mean anything to me, but I'm sure it means something to someone. So if I could also invite you to stay around after the event to have a drink in the map room and have a go at the interactive cities quiz, which is available there on some computer pads. So it's my pleasure to introduce to the RGS Eric Bonino, who is Executive Vice President of Global Solutions Downstream with Shell's Projects and Technology, and is the new chairman of Shell UK, a post he's held since April 2014. And he's going to say a few words on behalf of Shell, who sponsor the 21st Century Challenges series. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I suppose I should begin by knowing the audience. One should always begin in such a way. Hands in the air if you consider yourself to be a true urbanite. And who would look carefully, panelists, and who, hands in the air now, if you'd rather be anything else but a true urbanite. Oh, the future could be somewhat challenging. It is indeed my great pleasure to be here tonight and to be part of the Royal Geographical Society's program of 21st Century Challenge Lecture Series. I think it's right and proper that a company such as mine should recognize the role it has and indeed the obligation it has to be part of finding a solution to those challenges that are facing society today. And indeed, I'm reminded as I stand here in this very august theatre that did anyone see the opening ceremony for the 2012 Olympics? That wonderful theatre created by Danny Boyle, where those green and pleasant lands were transformed before our eyes into those dark satanic mills. And of course, today, in our subject of urbanization, we carry on that discussion of how do we continue that. It's quite remarkable that in only 150 years, the period from 1800 to 1950, we saw such change in our country, ending at a point where 80% of the population worked and lived in urban areas. And yet before that, we were a country of rural farmers. Quite remarkable that such a transformation should take place in such a short time. Now, it's also right and fitting that I thank our panelists for having made their time available tonight to lead this debate and discussion. It will be wonderfully chaired by Professor Rachel Cooper. My dear colleague, Jeremy Bentham is here, Dr. George McCarran, and Leo Hollis. I look forward to a very entertaining and enthralling discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, this is the last time you'll hear from me, and it's my pleasure to introduce Rachel Cooper, OBE, who's Professor of Design and Management and Policy at the University of Lancaster and Director of Imagination Lancaster, which is a multidisciplinary design laboratory. She's an internationally leading expert on livable cities and design and well-being, and therefore very well qualified to chair this evening's discussion. So you are now in Rachel's hands for the rest of the evening.
Well, we've had one question, are you all urbanites? How many of you live in London? How many of you escape from London? A lot. Okay, so most of you live in London, so it will be interesting when we have a discussion later on about your perspectives of a city, because cities are all very different, and I'm sure our speakers will talk about that too. We have, as a nation, always wanted to escape from the city, particularly in the period of industrialization, where it wasn't very good for our health to be here. So we did escape to the seaside and to the countryside, but we always did come back. We escaped generally because it was good for our health. The cities of the past weren't very healthy. Most of my work currently is about creating livable places and what the environment does to our health and our well-being. And there's an enormous amount of evidence now that the environment affects both our physical and our mental health. So I'm really interested in how we can design future places that are getting denser and denser, more people living next door to each other. How do we design them to make them more livable, make them happier? And in fact, who is making those design decisions? They're not always architects and planners. They're you and I. They are politicians. They are communities. So it'll be interesting tonight to get your views on how we can make the place that we live in mostly in cities, happier and healthier. And I have great pleasure in having a wonderful panel here to bring some of these points to the fore. So I'd first of all like to introduce them. We have Jeremy Bentham, who has actually worked for Shell for 33 years, a man and boy, you could say.
I am that old, yes I am.
And he's worked in technology, in the commercial side of Shell. He's been manager of the corporate strategy analysis within the corporate centre of the Shell Group. He's actually worked on projects for the Shell exploration and production business. He's been chief executive of Shell Hydrogen, and he now is responsible for Shell's global business environmental team, which, as he says, is not looking after the environment of the offices. It is actually about the scenarios, the future scenarios. He's going to talk to us about global urbanization and the future cities work that they've been doing, and help us understand how we can learn about cities that are livable elsewhere around the world. Then we have Leo Hollis, who's a writer, historian, urbanist, and lives in Cricklewood. Is that right?
That
is. He writes for the New Statesman, the Times Literary Supplements, and the Daily Telegraph. And of course, many of you will know him for his book, Cities Are Good For You, and I'm sure he's going to tell us exactly why cities are good for us. And finally, George McCurran, who I know because of the Mappiness app. He now lectures in environment and behavioural economics at the University of Sussex. His research covers topics such as well-being, environmental quality, spatial analysis and crowd sourcing. He's also Chief Technology Officer for Psychological Technologies, basically collecting all your feelings about the environment in which you live, I think. But he'll explain a little bit more about that later.